Let's go live to foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan. Greg, thanks for your time. You believe the Albanese government, I've been reading your analysis in The Australian today, you say they've made a shocking mistake in flagging their recognition of Palestine.
Yeah, Kieran. So it's one thing to criticise Benjamin Netanyahu's latest military campaign. That's reasonable. I'm critical of it myself. Nothing wrong with that. To conflate that criticism with recognising a state which doesn't exist is purely symbolic. I mean, people talk about the 140 states that already recognise Palestine. Most of them recognised Palestine decades ago. It didn't do anything to produce a Palestinian state. Hamas has been telling everyone what a tremendous victory this is. We slaughtered 1,200 Jews and we took 250 hostages, and look, the world now recognises a Palestinian state. All these once allies of Israel are now alienated from Israel. Hamas doesn't care about the suffering of the Gazan people. It could end it in a minute by releasing the hostages. It wants this situation. Now, I'm critical of Netanyahu for playing into their hands, but Albanese has handed Hamas a great victory. He has also disrupted a many decades-long deep friendship between the Israeli people and the Australian people. He's now personalised in a very childish way his disagreements with Benjamin Netanyahu. And this is a sign of a coward and a bully. You know, Albanese is praiseworthy in his cowardice in never criticising Trump. It's pretty pathetic the way he never criticises the People's Republic of China. But this lion of Marrickville can now beat up on Benjamin Netanyahu when everyone else in the world is doing the same. And the motive for this is entirely domestic politics. No one in the government thinks it will have the slightest effect on Ramallah or Bethlehem or anything. It might have an effect on Marrickville and Northcote and Broadmeadows and Liverpool. Plus, it allows him to do a bit of international grandstanding. I think it's one of the shabbiest episodes I've seen in Australian foreign policy.
One of the hopes that they have is that the Palestinian Authority might be able to deliver on the agreement made, not just with our government but with others. But I did speak to the Foreign Minister and put to her the fact that the Palestinian Authority has very little credibility, particularly with their own people.
Well, that's right, Kieran. I mean, this whole thing is just a joke. It's fantasy land. You know, the Palestinian Authority is so much in love with democracy that its president is now in his 20th year of a 4-year term. President Mahmoud Abbas himself has a long history of really grotesque anti-Semitism. He wrote a thesis on how the Jews connived with the Nazis to produce the Holocaust. And he says Hitler didn't kill the Jews because he hated the Jews, but because they were misusing money, and so on and so on and so on. Now, the Palestinian Authority has made countless promises all through its history, none of which it's ever lived up to. As I've written in today's paper, on 4 credible occasions, Israel offered a Palestinian state on what are really the maximal terms. And we don't need to rely on Israeli testimony about this. It's in all the American memoirs. The Palestinians could never accept it because their ideology is one of anti-Semitic Jew hatred. It's one of complete refusal to accept the legitimacy of a Jewish state in the middle of the Middle East. And they invent reasons then for not accepting it. Like they say, everyone who is any blood relative of anyone who ever lived in Israel in history has a right to resettle in Israel proper. Well, that's about 7 million people. Well, that's just a joke. Nobody would expect that that could happen. No. And for most of the last 10 years, it's been the Palestinian Authority which has refused to negotiate with the Israelis. So the idea that in this sort of first-year arts undergraduate way, Albanese has discovered the solution. Yippee, let's reform the Palestinian Authority, and then all the problems of the Middle East go away. It's truly pathetic. It has no intellectual coherence, no substance. It's very fashionable at the moment around the world amongst left-wing movements. And of course, there's one Jewish state and dozens of Muslim states. So it's good to beat up on the Jews. That's the dynamic of international relations historically. But once upon a time, democracies like Australia stood for principle. By all means, criticise Netanyahu, but don't reward terrorism and don't upend diplomatic reality. You recognise a new state when it comes into existence as a result of negotiation between the parties. Premature recognition is just a gesture. Why not recognise the Tibetan government in exile? They've got much more legitimacy than the Palestinian Authority. But of course, we're never going to do anything which annoys China like that. This is really futile gesture politics with no expectation on anyone's part that it will have any beneficial effect for any Palestinian or any Israeli. But it will, as you know, let me plug one of our competitors, as Phil Curry wrote in the Financial Review today. It won't do anything for the Middle East, but it does pacify the Labor Party.
When we think about the history, 1947, Australia, one of the first nations to recognise Israel as a homeland for the Jewish people, it is quite... it's a sad moment in many respects that this split has occurred in such a... or splinter has occurred in such a dramatic way. How much accountability or responsibility should be levelled at Netanyahu's feet as well?
Well, I'm very critical of Netanyahu at the moment, definitely. So he's a complex guy. He's had a giant career at the centre of Israeli politics. He's done a lot of very good things for Israel. He reformed the economy. He had great diplomatic success, both for Israel, both in Asia and with the Abraham Accords with its neighbours. He's threatening to put all that at risk now. Now, I think Israel is morally wrong to continue the war in the way that it's doing, and deserves criticism. I'd have no difficulty with the Australian government criticising the Netanyahu government. And I think the human cost is too high. And also I think he's doing grave damage to Israel internationally. You know, cowards like Albanese can jump on the anti-Israel bandwagon because Netanyahu has made Israel so unpopular. But, you know, in the face of that, you keep your head as an outside power. The other thing is Australia has absolutely zero influence in the Middle East. None at all. We have a much more obsessive discussion about the Middle East than we have about the South China Sea or Philippines politics or anything like that, because the obsession of the Western left with Israel is a part of its obsession with identity politics. And they see the Palestinian people as somehow or other representing oppressed, colonised people. You know, 500,000 people died in the Syrian civil war. That didn't move the conscience of the ALP a minute. 200,000 people died in Yemen. 150,000 people have died in the last couple of years in Sudan. Nobody bats an eyelid about that. But when there's something you can abuse Israel for, that excites the Western left tremendously. So yes, I agree. Netanyahu, in my view, is gravely at fault now and deserves criticism. To conflate that criticism with the gesture of diplomatic recognition for a state that doesn't exist, and that recognition will be permanent. And of course, the Australian position is self-contradictory. It says it's based on conditions, but then it's not going to wait for those conditions to be met. It's just going to offer the recognition anyway. All that does is reward the terrorists, demonise Israel, and encourage extremists on both sides, because the Palestinians think we get concessions from the West by murdering Jews and holding hostages. And the Israeli right thinks, look, the West hates us after all, so let's just maximise our territory while we can, while we're in armed conflict and while we've got Donald Trump in the White House. So insofar as it has any effect at all, it's a completely destructive effect.
Greg Sheridan, foreign editor at The Australian. Thank you as always. We'll see you next week.